Hello. Hi. Oh, this has been super fun. Over the last 3 days, I have come live to you every single day, teaching you a 3-step process to begin getting yourself out of the weeds. And I know if you've been following me on LinkedIn or listening to my podcast, you know for a while that getting out of the weeds could be the biggest thing that's holding you back from making it into that next level of leadership. So, over the last 3 days, I have showed you 3 different things that you can start doing immediately so that you can move yourself from being seen as the subject matter expert to being seen as a senior executive leader. And in today's broadcast, I am going to give you step number 3, which are very specific, tangible communication strategies that you can start doing yesterday, right? This is module 1. It's the core module of Executive Ahead of Time, my 6-week group training intensive, where I show you how to set yourself up for your next promotion and have actual success once you get there. And my clients and students who come into this program, today's lesson is why they have success inside of Executive Ahead of Time in week 1. So I'm giving it all to you, and you're going to love it because you're going to be able to implement it. You're going to get some wins, and you're going to be like, Stacy, why didn't I find you sooner? Well, I'm really glad you found me today. So who am I? My name is Stacy Mayer. I'm a promotion strategist and executive coach helping corporate women get promoted into senior executive leadership positions. I am on a mission to bring more diversity to the leadership table by getting 1,000 powerhouse corporate women just like you promoted into senior executive leadership positions each and every year worldwide. And I do that through my corporate training programs like Executive Ahead of Time, a 6-week group coaching intensive designed to set you up for your next promotion and the one after that, and the one after that, and the one after that, and making sure that you have success all along the way. And I also am the host of Maximize Your Career with Stacy Mayer. This is a podcast that can be found wherever podcasts are found, iTunes, Spotify, whatever you like. And I have over 80 episodes giving you all of the strategies that I teach my clients, but really I learned them from my clients. Because a little bit more background about me is I used to be a corporate coach when I first started. You know, you go to executive coaching school and you learn how to be a coach, and you teach things like time management and difficult conversations, emotional intelligence, and all of these great things that help you become a better manager. But what I was noticing is that my clients, while they were becoming better managers, were not necessarily getting promotions or opportunities at their organizations to make a bigger impact. Instead, what they were getting was more work, more responsibility. But at the end of the day, they felt very frustrated and stuck in their careers. And so I shifted my focus to specifically focus on what are those core strategies that are going to take you to that next level of leadership. And my philosophy is that we don't want to just climb the corporate ladder. We want to have an impact at our organization. We want to really know that we're influencing at the top. Many of you are someone who is fully capable of being an executive leader today. Like in terms of your skill set, you just haven't been given the tools to get yourself promoted. So that's what I teach. And in today's training, I'm talking about getting out of the weeds, which is my core foundational training that I teach inside of Executive Ahead of Time, which is actually enrolling right now. So if you're at all interested, shoot me a DM. I'm also going to put the link to register in the chat, but it's a 6-week group coaching intensive. Our first coaching session is September 3rd. So make sure you get signed up right away. We're only taking 30 women. So make sure you take advantage of that. But for today's lesson on part 3 of getting out of the weeds, go back after you listen to this broadcast and listen to part 1 and part 2. If you click on my LinkedIn profile, you will be able to see all of those parts and listen to it, say hi, comment, let me know what's working for you. and what you're actually trying out. Because if you start to implement this, you are going to start to see that you're making a bigger impact and you'll really enjoy your job more, which is kind of amazing. So in part one, as a recap, it was about identifying, are you somebody who's actually in the weeds? And there are two ways that we identify this. One is the one that you're probably already doing, which is that you feel a little stressed. You're always reacting to problems. You don't feel like you have enough time in your calendar to strategically think. You could be in an executive level position already. I have senior vice presidents who come into executive ahead of time and they're totally in the weeds. So it doesn't really matter what title you're at. Whatever you're doing is always very reactionary. And so speaking of title, even if you're at the individual contributor role, you can start to use what I'm teaching to pull yourself out of the weeds. So even if your day-to-day job is very detail, weedsy oriented, you can begin to make that bigger impact, that leadership level impact at your organization without changing titles. So in step one, on Wednesday of this week, I talked about how you can identify if this is something that you are. And so it's not just an identification of stress levels. So that's the one way that you can identify. But the other way to identify if you're somebody who's too far in the weeds is if you're getting promoted or not. And that shifts us into step two, which I talked about yesterday, which is perception, right? So when other executives at your organization do not perceive you as an executive leader, you will not get promoted, right? And so a lot of times when we are too far in the weeds, then we are not able to be promoted. And sometimes we do get promoted, right? So this isn't a surefire sign that you're too far in the weeds, because like I said, there's SVPs that are too far in the weeds. But we scale all of our bad habits with us. So the person who loses is us, right? But ultimately, our organization also loses because we're not able to make the real impact that we had envisioned that we want to be making at our organization. So I'm all about cleaning up all of those bad habits along the way so that we're scaling the right habits with us all the way to the top. And so in today's training, I'm actually going to give you some of those communication tools, what you can actually say, what words are going to start to come out of your mouth, how you're communicating. Are you communicating as somebody who is in the weeds, or are you communicating as a strategic thinker? Now, I want to further define this because I actually think that this was something that I had to learn, because I felt like the definition of being a strategic thinker, I just got a heart. If you guys want, say hi in the comments so that I know that you're listening, and let me know what's resonating with you. I'm super glad you're here. All right. So so I want to define this because I don't think it goes without saying. So if you are somebody who thinks of strategy as the plan, right? So like if you had this spreadsheet, or you're a project manager and that's the plan, that is the strategy to get to your end result, that is still being in the weeds, right? That's all of the details. Strategic thinking, on the other hand, and the way that I'm describing and talking about it today, is being much more visionary. Am I speaking to the vision? Am I talking about the bigger picture and how that ties into the organization? So in terms of communication, I think that's really important to note, because sometimes we get very confused as to what's strategy versus strategic thinking. So I mentioned that we're talking about communication today, and something that I really want you to realize is that getting out of the weeds is actually more about communication than it is about time management. It's more about communication than it is about time management. So you're going to start to, and what I'm teaching you today, shift the way you're communicating with executive leadership, including your boss and your team and your peers and everybody. But you may not change your calendar yet. Like eventually you will. Eventually you will carve out more time, because you'll start to prioritize strategic thinking and you'll need that time for thought leadership. But right now, it's like you could literally not get any be able to delegate anything, no new direct reports, anything. If you just shift this way that you're communicating, you're going to start to notice that you're able to make a bigger impact. And eventually you're going to get the rewards like a promotion or bigger opportunities where you're able to actually influence at the higher level as a result. So if it's more about communication than it is about time management, then how do we do that? So I'm going to show you how to do that in 3 ways. So the 3 ways that we're going to do that today, and I'm going to put these into the chat, are through listening, through asking questions, and by speaking to the solution. So these are the 3 ways that you're going to start to communicate your strategy, that you're out of the weeds, communicating at that higher level. So essentially, I said that communicating at that higher level is that, are you able to speak to the vision? But you notice like none of these communication strategies are have a clear vision, present your business case, right? They're actually very simple. And that's the beauty of it, is that you can literally start doing this today. And so I want you to implement all of these in all of your areas of communication. So whether you're having correspondence with your boss, with your peers, with your team, with executives, whatever that is, you're going to start to do these 3 things. So the first one is listen. And I hate to say this, but I do have to say it sometimes to people, is stop talking. And I hate to say that because I am a chatterbox and I have been told my entire life to stop talking, right? And I catch myself with my daughter, she's 6, and I tell her to stop talking. So I hesitate, like as a piece of advice, to say stop talking, because I think it's kind of crappy. Like, I want you to talk. I want you to be yourself, right? I want you to talk all you want. But what I mean by listening is actually allowing other people to talk. And so some of it is you do need to stop talking in order to do that, right? You have to listen to what they're saying. So let me give you an example. So you have a one-on-one with your boss, and your boss, is talking about a particular problem at the organization, and it has to do with your team, and you feel like you've got some ideas and you want to talk about it and you want to jump right in and you want to have a conversation, and maybe you feel a little bit defensive. And so you don't spend enough time listening, partially because you're so far into the weeds. And you can't even hear what her question is and what she's actually asking you. So the first thing that you're going to do is literally slow down. So before you start to get into all of the details at work, before you start to solve all of the problems, I want you to slow down and listen. There's a couple of like really practical techniques about listening, is like repeat what they say, or so what I hear you saying is, right? But you don't necessarily have to go into all the details right away, right? Like when they ask you a direct question, you can also answer it with a 1-sentence answer and then be like, do you need more, or do you need me to elaborate? But so many of us talk for like 15, 20 minutes thinking that what they're asking is for that entire answer. I also want you to realize that our executive team is busy, right? They don't want to hear about all your problems. So when we're thinking about how do we shift perception, which I talked about in the second video, step 2, go back to yesterday's video, how we're going to shift perception is we're going to start to show up like an executive leader. We want them to see us as an executive leader, and executive leaders don't, well, I say they don't drone on and talk about all the details and all these things, but you may have a couple of executives at your company who do that, but we don't have to do that. All right. And I actually don't want to be that leader either. It's very stressful. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to start listening, right? Really try and understand what it is that they're saying. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to ask questions. All right. And so this is a really great way for you to stay engaged in the conversation if you feel like you don't necessarily have the answers yet. And so maybe you're at an executive team meeting and you want to speak up, but you don't know what it is that they're talking about. So you just ask a really good question. And so I want you to start thinking about what are those questions that we can ask ourselves. I'm actually going to put in the chat here a PDF that, so this is a PDF download that I have available to you. It's totally free. Go to staceymayer.com/questions and download this. And you're going to see that it has a lot of questions that you can ask your mentors or sponsors, or when you're having these higher level, I teach a process inside of Executive Ahead of Time called 15-minute ally meetings. So when you're having those 15-minute ally meetings, these are the perfect questions for them. But they at least give you a good approach to the type of getting out of the weeds questions. So the getting out of the weeds questions look a little bit different. It's more like, have you thought about, or I remember a time, or I know the organization's mission is this. How does this tie into that? Right. So you're having these sort of like visionary type questions, but really just the willingness to stay engaged in the conversation and ask really good questions. Like, it's just literally as simple as that. If you start asking questions that are interesting, people are going to start to see you as a strategic thinker, as an executive, right? Because what does strategic thinker mean? It means we think. It means we think. We think about things, right? So asking questions shows them that you are an executive leader. And the third part is you're going to speak to the solution, which implies not the problems. So you're not going to be doing your check-in with the scorecard. If your boss does ask you a direct question, you're going to try and answer it as succinctly as possible. And then you will reply with something like, if you want to know more details, I have them. Because like I said, your day-to-day job may not change. You're just not going to vomit all of those details on the table all at once, right? But when you are talking about areas of opportunity or a challenge that you see, or wanting to bring up a problem at work, which is very common, and you should bring up these challenges, instead of talking about just the problem, I want you to talk about what you're trying to do to fix the problem, right? So what is your solution? And then ask them for their opinion about your solution, right? So our tendency when we're too far into the weeds, when we're acting like the subject matter expert and not the executive leader, is to speak to the problems and to ask our boss for opinions. But when we start to become the executive ahead of time, we are talking proactively about solutions and still getting their advice, still listening to their advice, implementing their advice, wanting their advice, right? These are all the things that we're going to start to do. All right. So those are the three main areas of focus. You're going to listen, you're going to ask questions, and you're going to speak to the solution instead of the problem. When you start to do this, you will be pulling yourself out of the weeds. I have a client inside of Executive Ahead of Time, and after module 1, what she started to do, she was complaining about how her conversations with her boss were 2 hours long. Her weekly one-on-ones were 2 hours long. And she said, well, they have to be, because he asks me about all the details, right? But she started to implement what I just shared with you today. And she moved those conversations from 2 hours to 45 minutes. And you know what? He thanked her. He thanked her. That is what you have to remember, is this is actually based on what they want to hear. This is executive level communication. And if you don't believe it, try it out in small bursts. You don't have to do all 3 at once. Like, slow down, talk less, right? Don't just automatically jump into your scorecard. Ask more questions than you would normally. But before presenting a problem, speak to the solution. Whatever it is that you want to start doing, just start doing it, right? You're not going to piss these people off, especially if you do it slowly and you don't withhold information. Like, if they're asking you about it directly, like, answer their question, but like, really just start to see. And you're going to feel better. You're going to have more space. You're going to have more time to think strategically. If you're asking better questions, you have to think about them. What are the questions? What do I want to get out of this meeting today? Start doing it. You're going to pull yourself out of the weeds. Your stress levels are going to go down. You're going to start making a bigger impact at your organization. You're going to get called into higher level executive decision making, right? They're going to want to see you because they're going to start to trust that you are, in fact, an executive leader. So everything that I'm sharing with you today is part of Executive Ahead of Time. I'm not making this up that this is actually what's going to happen, because it happens over and over and over and over and over again. I learned all of these techniques through practically trying them with my clients, because my goal, like I said at the beginning, is to get women promoted into higher level executive positions. I don't want you to just be a better manager. I want you to get paid. I want you to have the title to back it up. I want you to be able to make a real influence and have a bigger impact at your organization. An Executive Ahead of Time is the foundational core part of that process. Inside of Executive Ahead of Time, our first module is getting out of the weeds. So everything that you've learned in this 3-part training is setting you up to be successful inside of Executive Ahead of Time. Let me put the URL in here so that you guys can check it out and register. And I'm just going to talk. And if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat. Even if you're watching the replay, say hi and pop it into the chat so that I know what your questions are, because I want to answer them for you, whether it's about getting out of the weeds or about Executive Ahead of Time. So what's the timeline? We're actually open for enrollment now for the next couple of weeks. The first coaching session is September 3rd. The live training of the 6-week program runs September 3rd through October 15th. But I didn't want to wait to start coaching you guys. So I'm offering bonus coaching sessions throughout the summer. And our next one is next Wednesday. So if this seems like something you want to do, if you really want to set yourself up for success in the fall, then I recommend getting registered, or at least reach out to me with your questions ASAP so that we can get you registered before our bonus training session on Wednesday. And inside of Executive Ahead of Time, essentially what I'm doing is creating a world of corporate badasses, one amazing leader at a time. It's an incredible community. Every week you're going to get coaching from me so that you can actually apply these in real time, because you could say, well, I tried this with my boss, but it didn't work, and I'm going to tell you what to do instead. You're going to get wins almost immediately after joining the program. Like I said, people have wins in the first week. I care about your success. So we also have weekly accountability with the other women in the group. You're going to meet with them on Fridays as well. And this is a huge, huge part of the program, to meet other like-minded professionals who are dealing with the same challenges. And it's just an incredible opportunity. So I would love, love, love to have you there. And honestly, I just want you to be happier. I want you to start to be able to make that impact at your organization right away. So implement what I've talked about in this 3-part training. If you missed the other 2 days, go back to Wednesday and Thursday. It's in my LinkedIn profile. And otherwise, I send you so much love, wish you all the best. Connect with me in instant messaging, and I'll see you soon. Bye.